My dear friends, once more, good morning. A while back, I was having a conversation with a parishioner, and they asked me a question about the divinity of Christ. And the question they asked me was, there's no specific place in the Gospels where Jesus reveals to us that he is God. So why do we continue to believe that Jesus Christ is God? There's nothing explicit in the Gospels that tells us that. And I was trying to explain to him something about the natural connection between the Son and the Father. And I said, there's nothing in the Gospel that directly tells us that Jesus Christ is God. Jesus himself never calls himself God, but he calls himself the Son of the Father. He refers to himself as the Son of God. And therefore we believe that Jesus Christ is God because the Son and the Father must always share the same nature if they are going to have that relationship. That the relationship between the Father and the Son is a relationship that is connected by nature. And therefore, if someone is going to refer to themselves as the Son of the Father, implicitly, they share the same nature as the Father. And because they share the same nature as the Father, therefore they are of the same nature as the Father. And in the case of Christ, if he shares the same nature as the Father, that therefore de facto makes him God. But I think sometimes, again, this could be somewhat philosophical or somewhat theological. And so part of the responsibility of the Gospels is to make some of this information somewhat practical. And a very practical way of trying to understand this relationship of the sonship of Christ is to go back to the parable that Jesus tells us in St. Luke's Gospel, chapter 15, the story of the prodigal son. And I think in that story, which has become, I think, a major touchstone in our faith, I think it tries to capture for us a relationship between the Father and the Son. And in that parable, Jesus tells us of two sons. Both of them do not want to be in their father's house. Both of them detest to be in the father's house. The younger son, because he thinks that there's more fun out there, because he thinks there's more adventure out of the father's house. And the other son, precisely because he thinks that by being out of the father's house, working in the field, he's able to somehow impress his father. So both sons, in essence, are doing the same thing, and they're blaming each other for the same, somewhat of the same attitude or the same disposition that they have. But I think that is precisely what makes that parable so unique. Because I think when the father confronts both sons, the younger son coming back and saying that I'm willing to come back to the father's house, I'm willing to come back to your house even as a slave, and then the older son saying, okay, I'm going to come back precisely because you have promised me that everything that you have is going to be mine at some point. I think the father is trying to reestablish something in the two sons. And it is the fact that that relationship must always be lived within the domain of the Father's house. That if we're truly going to understand the relationship of father and son, it requires that we do so within the context, within the confines of the Father's home. And that is precisely what the divinity of Christ teaches us. And that is what the parable of the prodigal son tells us. That each one of us as children of God, we are called to recognize that we can only live fully that vocation when we do so within the context of the Father's house. And that is a part of what Jesus tells us in today's gospel. Because Jesus reminds us, no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and everyone to whom the Son wishes to reveal him. There's implications in this relationship. And the first implication, when we recognize the need to continue to live within the context of the Father's house, is that it is the place in which we're able to encounter trust. We can never fully and truly trust the Father except within the context of his home. And when we look at the two sons, both of them out of the Father's house, they are not able to live out a relationship of trust. But within the context of the Father's house, because they continue to build that relationship from a place of strength, they are able to trust the Father. And that is why the next thing Jesus says is so critical. Come to me, all you will labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest. We can only truly understand our burdens within the context of our relationship with God when we are within the Father's house, because that is where we trust the Father the most. It is within the context of the Father's house that we're able to experience the Father's providence and the Father's care. And that is why Jesus invites us to that relationship of being children to the Father as He is son to the Father. I remember when I was a little boy, about maybe 8 years old, my dad would always call me. He had a little library in his house, just 2 bookcases. My dad was so much into education and he loved books a lot. And I remember my friends would be outside playing, just 8 years old, and I wanted to go out to play. And every time he'll call me, little Henry, come in. And we'll go in there and reorganize the books. And then after 2 weeks again, he'll call me, we'll go back and reorganize the books. And every time reorganizing these books. And I'm sitting there just saying to myself, what the heck is wrong with this man? We do this stuff every time, and this time he wants us to put it this way, and then this time this way. But my father was teaching me a lesson. And today I have a love of books because of that experience. Because of the fact that I was willing to work with him. I was willing to be in his presence. I was willing to learn from him. He did not leave us a lot of money behind. He did not leave us a lot of material things behind. But he planted in our hearts a love for education and a love for knowledge. And in that very little experience, I came to love books myself and to love to learn. That is the value of being in the Father's presence and of being in the Father's house. In that environment, we're able to learn the value of the virtue of trust.